Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today at the Spanish Written Exam webinar. Before we begin, if you've not been to a webinar with us before, you do have a couple of options to interact with us today and ask questions. You can raise your hand, or definitely if you have a direct question, please feel free to use that questions box on your screen. Hola y bienvenidos a Español. My name is Zach. I'm one of two Spanish teachers here at Penn Foster. Also with us here today is my colleague Dan, who is available to answer those questions. You do have a variety of ways to contact us throughout your Spanish course if you're having trouble, have any concerns. Phone, email, chat, text, and appointment scheduling, as you can see on the right-hand side. Additionally, we've put together a lot of different helpful documents hosted on the academic resource websites on the left, so please feel free to use those throughout your studies. On today's objectives, we're going to do a couple things. First is to describe each of the Spanish written exams, what's required for those exams. Next, to locate where to find project instructions and audio selections within the course. Next, how to describe uploading assignments. Identifying reasons for a returned assignment if this should come up. Everything you need to know regarding plagiarism within the Spanish course, but also within Penn Foster altogether. And finally, we'll give you some tips for success and end with any questions that you may have at the end. So without further ado, we'll get started now with the Spanish Written Exam webinar. First thing to know is there are 5 written exams in the course. Exams 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12. And you see that each of them corresponds with a specific study unit, so you may see them referred to as that way throughout your course as well. And on the right-hand side, you have the exam numbers. Definitely not anything you need to memorize or even include on your exam submission. Really just that there are 5 written assignments, and as long as you set them up the correct way and submit the correct files, we'll be in good shape. Start off with exam number 4. This is 3 parts. And part 1 is error detection. We are going to provide you a sentence written in Spanish with an error. So you want to correct that error so that it translates to the English translation supplied. So again, you're rewriting the sentence correctly in Spanish. So an example of that, if we said, "Él están jugando al béisbol," we see in the original sentence there, we have a problem with the verb because it's a plural verb. It does not agree with the singular subject of this sentence, él, which means he. So we have to change the plural verb to singular so that it agrees. In the next section is math completion. And you will be solving the math problem and writing your answer in Spanish word format. So if we give you, for example, dos times cinco, 2 times 5, we know that answer is 10. Your answer would be 10. And then finally, part 3 is reading comprehension. You'll be reading through a story in Spanish and answering a couple questions in English based on what you've read. The next exam, number 6, is 4 parts. Part 1 is matching, and you'll be matching images with commands. Part 2 and Part 3 are pretty similar. They deal with the concept of verb conjugation. So in Part 2, you'll be given a set of irregular verbs, and you'll need to conjugate those or give us the correct form of the verb depending on the pronoun in present tense. So if we give you salir, which means to leave, any verb that ends with AR, ER, or IR is considered an infinitive, and it translates with the word to. So salir means to leave. The next column you'll see is the pronoun. So in this case, ellos or ellas. This is third person plural, they. So what we're looking to say here is they leave in Spanish, and that answer would be salen. So as I mentioned, part 3 is pretty similar to part 2, although you're only dealing with two different verbs, saber and conocer, and these are the 2 verbs which mean to know in Spanish. In addition to conjugating in present tense, you may need to conjugate in the imperfect tense, which is one of the past tenses in Spanish. So the first thing to know is with saber and conocer, they are used differently depending on context. So when you use saber, that's if you know something for certain or as a fact, or you know how to do something. You would use conocer in instances of if you know someone or something, say as an acquaintance, or you're familiar with someone or something, those would be using conocer. So we gave you a couple examples here. So when Anna knows many things, she knows them for certain. We're going to be using forms of saber. You see with the first sentence, sabe would be present tense and sabía would be the imperfect tense. Over on the right, Ana knows Juan. These are using conocer. So conoce for present tense and conocía for imperfect. And then the final section of the exam is reading comprehension again, although this time you'll be answering true or false to the statements that you're reading on that exam for the story. Now, anytime you do have a false answer, you do want to make sure you correct it to make it true, just so that you earn full credit. In our next exam, number 8, this is also 4 parts. Parts 1 and 2, you'll be given sentences. You'll need to translate those from English to Spanish, as you can see in the example there. In part 3, you're going to be translating from Spanish to English. And we have the example, pon tu lápiz aquí, meaning place or put your pencil here. And then in part 4, we have one of 2 options, and it really depends on your time of enrollment within Penn Foster. So if you've enrolled more recently into the program, you'll be presented with a free response section. You'll need to follow the specific directions on your exam. You'll have questions on translation, forming sentences using a specific verb, and other types of questions. If you enrolled earlier into the program, you may have seen this older audio section. And what you'll need to do is you'll have a passage, and you'll need to fill in the missing words in Spanish in that passage. The audio selection will be found on tape 4L, side A, 2.5 to 3.5 minutes, starting with the 2 words en la. Please note you'll just have one of these options for part 4, not both. And again, best to just follow the directions that are on your exam. Take a brief moment to pause and see if you do have any questions for Dan. Please feel free to send those in at this time. Moving right along, the 4th written exam, number 10, is 3 parts. Part 1 is translation, English to Spanish, once again. And we give you another example there you can take a look at. Part 2 is translation Spanish to English. This time, though, you'll be given a passage with some underlined words in it, and you'll just need to supply the English translation of those words. And then in part 3, this is listening comprehension. You're going to be listening to 2 Spanish poems, very short Spanish poems, and writing those also in Spanish as you hear them. Titles of those poems are No sé qué te diera, I don't know what I would give you, and Veo la luna, I see the moon. These 2 poems are found on the same tape as exam 8. If you had that audio section, tape 4L side A, this time though 9 to 10 minutes on the time. And then your last written exam in the course, exam number 12, is 2 parts. Part 1 is translation, English to Spanish. Part 2 is pretty similar to the exam 8 options. So if you enrolled more recently into the high school program, it'll be a free response section once again. This time, we're asking you a couple of personal questions about yourself in Spanish. Maybe what's your name, where do you live, etc. If you enrolled earlier into the program, you may have a listening comprehension section, and you'll be listening to a story in Spanish and writing an English summary of 10 to 20 sentences in your own words. You do have a choice of which story you'd like to listen to if you have this part of the exam. So tape 4L side B, 3:30 to 15 minutes. The story Papá siempre tiene la razón, Father is always right. Or on tape 4L side A, 13 to 21 minutes, Circo, an old Ukrainian tale. Again, please note you just need to listen to one story if you do have this version of the exam. It does need to be a summary, so you don't want to necessarily write down every single thing that you hear. Rather, take the events that happened and put those in your own words. So we'll be moving into the next section of the webinar at this point about project instructions and audio and finding those within your course. Definitely, if you have any questions on those 5 written exams that we just discussed, please feel free at any time to send those questions in, and we'll pick up in just a moment. All right, so define project instructions and audio selections within your course. Again, this is really going to depend on your time of enrollment into the high school program. So we're going to show you a couple screenshots here of what your student portal may look like depending on your enrollment time. First example may be of a student that enrolled earlier into the high school program. The first thing you see is we're working on exam 8 Spanish. We have a study unit. This is where all of your learning lesson material will be. Every study unit does come with a corresponding tape. That would be the tape right below the study unit. So tape 4, side B, goes with a study unit for exam 8. You additionally, on some of the lessons, will see the tape 4L, listening comprehension, side A or side B. So please make sure you know the difference between 4 and 4L in this case. 4L will be used strictly for the exam, whereas tape 4 will be used for any of the lesson content. If you didn't get a chance to write down any of those time markers that we talked about earlier, please feel free to look at the supplement at the bottom of the course, Clarification on Spanish Exams Audio Sections, and that'll give you a list of where to find all those audios. To find your exam directions, they are going to be found directly in the study materials, so you'll want to go into the study unit, and you'll come across a page that looks very similar to this. It'll give you some information about academic integrity or plagiarism, followed by the examination number and exam name. So you'll know you've reached the exam when you get to this page. As I mentioned, things may look a little bit differently depending on enrollment time. So this next screenshot is for students that enrolled more recently into the program. Still working here on exam 8. And this time, though, we have different assignments. So the first thing being that study unit. The next one being the audio tape 4. Again, the audio tape going with the study unit. Next up would be the flashcards. This will help you out with any of your vocab throughout the course. And then the final 3 assignments on this list are everything you need to know for the exam itself. So project instructions and then your listening comprehension tapes. Just to show this a little bit further, when you click on project instructions, this will be the page that you see. If the exam has an audio component, you'll be given a reminder up top about where to find the audio, which you can see. It'll give you steps to upload your assignment. And then at the very bottom, you'll click on that link to view the actual exam questions. So we have heard from students they were having trouble with launching the audio for whatever reason in the course. So what Dan and I did was create specific links that you can find the audio on. So if you're going through an exam with an audio section, you can feel free to click on the link below the directions to launch the audio. Usually students have a little bit more success with that, so please feel free to use those. So now we'll be moving into the final section of the webinar for today. If you have any questions about the different buttons and assignments that you saw within those screenshots, please feel free to send the questions in. And next we'll be moving on to uploading your written assignment and other submission options. So similar to other written exams at Penn Foster, most likely your English exams being a high school student, you may type your responses on a word processor like Microsoft Word, Google Docs, WordPad. There are a couple of others that you can use as well. The next step is very important. You want to make sure it's saved in one of the following formats or extensions. RTF stands for Rich Text Format, and then your standard doc and docx formats. Once you have confirmed you've saved the document in that format, you just want to follow the upload instructions followed within the exam directions. Now, some students report that they don't have a way to use a word processor. That's totally fine as well. You can mail or fax your exam to us for evaluation. It does take a little bit longer for it to get here and be graded, but it is an option. So now our fax number is listed on your screen, 570-961-4038. You want to make sure you have all the identifying information on anything you send, whether it's through fax or mail. So your name, your student ID number, and the exam name or number. And then finally, the mailing address, Penn Foster, Attention Spanish, 925 Oak Street, Scranton, Pennsylvania, 18515. So next, to check on the status of your exam, where we are with the grading process, you can always consult the grades page on your student portal. And we want to show you a couple of options you'll see and what they mean. So looking at the Spanish course here, we see the first thing, exam 3, has a numerical score of 85. So all the exams are graded on a 100-point scale. Another option you may see is the word returned. This means your assignment was reviewed. However, there may have been a missing requirement or two, so it could not be graded. It was returned to you for revision. And then the third option you'll see is the word received. And this designates you have submitted your assignment or it was received by us and is awaiting a grade. So typically 5 to 7 business days for evaluation on a written assignment, although many times with the Spanish course, it's much quicker than that. So you may be wondering, why would my exam be returned to me ungraded? And here are a couple of the top reasons that we've seen within the Spanish course. If you do not follow directions, if you write something in Spanish and it asks you to write it in English, for example, it would be returned. All of the exams have multiple parts, so if you don't complete one or more parts, it would be returned for that. On the later exams with audio, they are specific to the exam you're working on, so if you do complete the wrong audio selection. Going along with that, if you submit the wrong exam, say you submitted exam 8 for exam 12, or finally, any kind of blank documents or any documents that can't be opened. So as it mentions here, these are top reasons for returns, but definitely not a list of all the reasons that we've seen. So it's important to consult the instructor feedback file for the specific reason your exam was returned. The instructor feedback file is good for information about returns, but it's also good to determine how we grade your exam, or if your exam contained plagiarized information, it'll give you next steps of how to proceed. So very important that you take a look at the instructor feedback file. So to find the instructor feedback file, what you want to do is go to the course in question on your grades page, and you'll see the words view feedback. So when you click on view feedback, you'll see the second box, and you can download either your submitted project for grading or the instructor feedback. So take a look at the instructor feedback whenever possible, as I mentioned about, very important information regarding your graded or ungraded exam. So next up, we're going to talk about plagiarism, specifically with the Spanish course, but also a couple of policies by Penn Foster that we follow. Since we are an accredited high school program, we do need to maintain academic integrity within the program, so we do take plagiarism very seriously. Any use of a language translator like Google Translate, any answers from Brainly, JustAnswer.com, and others can be identified. It will require you to complete additional work on top of that. So if your exam happens to be plagiarized, the first time around, your exam will be graded with the 1% score, and it will require a retake in your own words. If the plagiarism happens again on the same exam, you'll be given another 1% score, and now you'll be required to complete an alternate exam. And then finally, if this alternate exam is plagiarized, further disciplinary action will be taken up to and including termination. Fortunately, we have seen students terminated from Penn Foster because of plagiarism within Spanish. So many students think that just because Spanish is one of my last courses, I'd be able to get away with it. Not the case. We do monitor for plagiarism. We're very keen on which websites students use. So definitely if you're in any doubt as to what constitutes plagiarism, or you have any concerns about this, definitely best to speak with Dan or myself, get that resolved for you so we don't have to worry about termination. So generally, how can you avoid plagiarism in Spanish? The first one's pretty obvious, but just use your own words on the written exams. You don't need to look up anything online. Everything you may need to know can be found directly back in the study material. And as we wrap up for today, we definitely want to give you just a couple of quick tips for success. First one is please take your time. Spanish is probably one of the longest high school electives that we offer. With 5 written assignments, it definitely takes students a little bit longer to get through this than other courses, so that's definitely okay if it's taking you a little bit more time than you anticipated. Learning another language or language acquisition is difficult, does take thorough time and preparation. You may have to read the study material a couple of times to really grasp what you're reading through. Try out the vocabulary flashcards, etc. As I discussed with the plagiarism speech, please do not search the internet. It does result in more work and disciplinary action, especially if multiple exams are plagiarized within your program. And finally, Dan and I are very approachable, so please ask any questions throughout your course. No question is a dumb question. You may definitely ask small questions if you're not understanding something, say in lesson 1, and you don't get that question resolved at that point. Spanish does grow on each other. You're definitely going to learn, new topics, but a lot of past material will keep coming up as you move through the course. So definitely good to get those questions answered right away. On that note, if you have any last-minute preguntas, any questions, please feel free to ask those at this point. I list it once again, our contact options, phone, email, chat, text, and appointment scheduling, as well as those 2 academic resource websites. Dan and I both thank you for your attendance today. We hope you do well in the Spanish course, and as I mentioned, any questions that come up, please feel free to reach out. Have a great day.